Lo decían los organizadores de este Blockchain Summit 2020, este Blockchain Summit global, que íbamos a tener un espacio muy especial dedicado a las mujeres en este mundo de la tecnología. Y ha llegado el momento con este Fireside Chat que tiene como host a Mariana Sanguinetti, que está aquí en Montevideo, Uruguay. Ella es PR Director de Eternity y que va a estar en diálogo con Amiti Uttarwar desde los Estados Unidos. El tema de esta conferencia, de esta charla en inglés, será Bitcoin Core and Women in the Tech World. Adelante, Mariana.
Muchas gracias, Alejandra. Well, I'm going to present Amity for those who don't know her yet. Amity is a Bitcoin Core contributor focused on the peer-to-peer layer, where she works to improve privacy, testing, and robustness. She is passionate about Bitcoin as it is a truly global and inclusive money with the potential to redefine our societal ideas of wealth. She also believes in the importance of technical education and community involvement. In addition to speaking on podcasts and developing thoughtful presentations, she started Bitcoin Bytes and the Bitcoin Zine to encourage public engagement, co-sponsored by OKCoin and BitMEX. Her personal interests include off-trail backpacking, ice climbing, yoga, and meditation, and soon, air yoga, right? Welcome, Amity. How are you? It's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure for us to be able to have you in this fireside chat. And I would like to start with a little bit of your history. In an interview that you gave a long time ago for Forbes, they describe you as the true face of the American dream. So can you tell us a bit about your family history?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my parents both were born in dirt villages in India, so very small towns. And over their lives of working hard, really pursuing education, they've been able to come to America and be quite successful here. So I was brought up in California, but I have very close ties to my Indian roots. I have tons of family in India. And I definitely feel like I'm living a dream.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. So many of us can connect with your story. Now, do you remember the first time you heard about crypto? When was this? What was your reaction? Do you remember your first impressions about it?
A little bit. I mainly remember it was, I think, early 2017 that I learned about Bitcoin and blockchain and was really curious about what all of this was. And I remember two of the earliest things I did was one, watching a TED Talk on what is a blockchain. And another was a weekend where I was scuba diving. And at night, I was reading the Bitcoin white paper. And one of my first impressions was, whoa, you can get a message out to everyone in the world in a couple of seconds. Internet is really fast.
So it was like an inspirational scuba dive.
Yeah, I guess so. Who knows?
So that was your first approximation to it. Now, I wanted to let you know something I feel. You know, I kind of have mixed feelings about reading, the title, First Female Bitcoin Core Developer, right? On the one hand, I feel like it is amazing that more and more women are getting into it. But on the other hand, that it is still a piece of news. You know, it's worth a piece of news. The fact that a woman is there, it makes me feel that we are not quite there yet. So why do you think there are still fewer women in IT and especially in crypto and blockchain?
Yeah, I totally agree. When I first found out that there were no core contributors that are women, or at least no identified contributors, I was really shocked and I was really appalled. Like, it felt very unacceptable and outrageous. How could we be? I thought we were in like 2020, or I guess at that time 2018 maybe. And how could there not be women? And this is something that I've wondered the entire time. And I don't have any great answers, because ever since I've learned about Bitcoin and crypto, I've just been running at it, trying to learn more and more. So it's a little hard for me to understand why everyone isn't.
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously I can understand certain societal systems that are in place. I think that both finance and tech are both worlds where we have seen chronic underrepresentation of women, and crypto is bringing these two worlds together. So maybe that's why. It's so hard to say. I don't really understand why it's that way. I don't think it's necessary. I've seen a lot of reports and studies that talk about how women tend to manage the finances of the household a lot more than the men do around the world, which I find interesting, believable, and I think that there's a ton of room for societal kind of shift to occur with different populations being more represented. Some stories I've heard around Bitcoin are in certain countries where a lot of times women aren't allowed to keep wealth, especially in certain populations within certain countries. They've been able to use Bitcoin to earn wealth that, you know, their family, their husbands, et cetera, can't take away from them. And so I think that, and it's not just about women. I think there's a lot of different possibilities, whether it's your race or your country of birth or your skin color or your gender, et cetera. We see so many systemic issues of power and wealth imbalance. And for me, I think it's pretty simple. The idea of money is to be a means of exchange, is to be able to conduct business or share products, share services, et cetera. So everyone should have that available to them as an option.
Absolutely.
So I see crypto as hopefully, like in certain ways, a second chance, but at the same time, we need to work hard to make sure we don't fall into the same traps that humans currently have found themselves in.
Well, I hope we learned our lesson from past models that have failed, and we can have a fresh start from now onwards. So I am a little bit curious of how was the process of becoming a core developer at Bitcoin? You know, it's like you don't wake up one day and, okay, I'm a core developer. Maybe you do, but I'm curious about the process. How did you get there?
Yeah, absolutely. The process has been, it's been a wild journey, and I've enjoyed it, and it's been terrifying, and it continues to be. So I'll tell you a bit about my experience. So once I started learning about blockchains and Bitcoin, I was, reading a lot of white papers and just trying to search for how can I get more involved. And I live in the Bay Area, so there is definitely a decent amount of access I have. I attended conferences at Stanford as well as UC Berkeley that were crypto themed, and I learned a lot about different projects that are currently happening. And it was just so exciting. It was the first time that I was doing professional things outside of work. Prior to that, I felt like I like my job as a software engineer, but once I'm done working, I want to spend time outside or play music or do something different. But when I learned about blockchain technology, et cetera, I found myself, spending my nights after scuba diving reading a white paper or doing this. So I just tried to pursue it. And it kind of went through ebbs and flows of a wave, where they come in bursts of energy and excitement, and I learn about things. But then it was tough because I think everybody in the space kind of faces this at some point where there's just so much going on. There's so much valid projects. There's so much extra noise. There's just so much hubbub that it's hard to figure out your own footing, to figure out where you can be impactful and have focus, etc.
Yeah, kind of overwhelming.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so... Mm-hmm.
So how did you end up deciding, well, this is the path?
Yeah, well, in a way, I'm still deciding it every day. But I identified that I really wanted to work at Coinbase because it seemed like a very good hub for connecting to different projects. A lot of different projects that I've seen either came out of people who graduated or like alumni from Coinbase, or had close relations with. And so I felt very clear that this was the next step for me. So I prepared. I went through the interview process. There's some setbacks along the way, but eventually I got accepted onto the crypto team. And that was really great for my growth.
That's great, and that's great that we usually hear these success stories where everything seems so easy and no bumps in the road. So we appreciate the honesty of saying, you had ups and downs, because that's what happens to regular people, normal people. So it's really good to hear from you that you had your ups and downs, and that you found your path, and that you're continuously finding your path, which is also very inspiring. I wanted to ask you, for the rest of us, is there a way in which people can get involved and contribute to the Bitcoin ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm working on trying to understand all of the different possibilities myself. And I do think it's important to look around and be honest with yourself. Like, what is your skill set? What are your interests? Because if you're fully interested in something, you can develop the skills. But recognizing when you do something, when are you attached to the outcome versus when do you enjoy the process? And so, and looking at what is your community like? What are you seeking? Because I have found my footing as a contributor of Bitcoin Core, and I truly enjoy it. Like, when I spend several hours deep in the code trying to understand the nuances of some logic, I get energized by it. And I recognize that this isn't what everybody gets energized by. And I think that's great, because as a Bitcoin community, we need people who have all different sorts of talents. We need people who write code, but we also need people who are able to educate and express, why is the system different? We need people who are talented in design and art to create inspiration and help propel the movement. We need all sorts of things along the way. The list can go on and on and on. So I think, in all honesty, looking at what your skill sets are and what your community is asking for is the first starting point. Because there are a fair amount of Bitcoin companies. There are other crypto projects too, which I think are cool. Obviously, Bitcoin's caught my heart, but I think that there's a lot of different opportunities once you are fairly clear on what you want. So I think the best is to look around, and I can't give a prescription of what makes sense for everybody, but I'm always happy to help. If anybody reaches out, I'm always happy to brainstorm possible avenues.
That's really nice. That's really nice, and especially focusing on your skills and the community you're part of, and see how you can shift things and propel the ecosystem. So now you mentioned different crypto. I wanted you to ask maybe a spicy question, which would be: are you a maximalist, or do you believe in the existence of different crypto? I think you kind of answered that just a while ago, but maybe we could go deeper into that.
Absolutely. Honestly, I would say both yes and yes. I do believe in Bitcoin, and the way I express it is that I'm exclusive with my attention, but I'm generous with my support. So I think there's a lot of really interesting and valid crypto projects, and I think it's great because we see our current systems of organizing as humans, and there's a lot of things that work well, and there's a lot of problems and trade-offs about the current systems. And so I think as a space, really where we are is in a very experimental state of, okay, there's some new technologies, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of potential here. How can we play those out, and how can we explore turning those into real world solutions? And so I think, obviously, there's a ton of scams and a lot of noise, and that, we can easily dismiss. But I think that there is also a large scale of projects in terms of like viable in the current state to experimental. And I do think that Bitcoin is one of the best defined projects that I'm familiar with, but I don't think that is inherently means that it's okay to be dismissive, or that it's like positive to be dismissive of other projects. What really initially compelled me about blockchain is this introduction of a new trust model of how humans can interact with one another. Because historically, we've only had two, which is direct and hierarchical. Either I get to know you, we build trust, we can do business and make promises, or I put trust into, for example, a system. Or if I get to know you and you say this other person is trustworthy, then I can do business with them. And so we've expanded that into all these systems, whether it's Amazon and Airbnb, or it's the way that the internet works, all sorts of things. And Bitcoin or blockchain is really introducing this new fundamental trust model, saying you can come to an agreement with a stranger without having to trust them.
That's incredible.
And I think the possibility for this is really impactful. And to say that only one project is allowed to explore it just sounds ridiculous to me. But I do think that Bitcoin compels me because, you know, it's a clear problem statement of we're trying to be a global money. And in many ways it already is, which is a very different problem statement than some of the really big ones that different projects are trying to tackle with. So I do see them as quite different, but I think they're all worthwhile pursuits.
Great, great, good to know. So maybe you mentioned a little bit about this, but as part of this industry, how do you see blockchain and the near future, but also like 10 years future? I mean, we don't have the crystal ball, right? But what do you think that will happen from 10 years from now regarding what is the future of blockchain?
That's a tough one. Honestly, I think Bitcoin is so young that in 10 years, like maybe we are able to get further on our goals of scalability, usability, global access, etc. And maybe we'll be most of the way there with Bitcoin in 10 years. But I think that it's still a very far out timeline, and 10 years would be really optimistic for Bitcoin. And I see other projects as having even further out timelines.
Good. So I'm going to ask you my last question. I am truly convinced, especially among women, but in general, that people who get to places, they need to send the elevator down, you know, so that other people can come up. So I would like to finish this lovely interview with your words, and I'm going to focus on what would you say to a young woman that is starting in the blockchain world, and she's kind of not confident enough, a little bit shy. What would be your inspiring words for a young woman starting in blockchain and crypto and feeling intimidated by the financial man environment?
Absolutely. Few things. One is it's hard. It's building confidence, being able to speak up is a skill all of itself. And honestly, it's a harder skill than any technical one. It's harder than writing code, learning C++, etc. So recognize that and build it explicitly. And I think the best way to build confidence is find the people who lift you up. Don't stay around people who judge you for asking questions. Find communities who encourage you to be skeptical, to ask questions, and figure out your way to make a contribution to whatever inspires you in a way. Like find what's on your learning curve, because you do, just by virtue of having interest and willingness to spend time on it, you have a unique capability. Like everyone has their own superpower. So find a way to build something, to create something, because that will help develop your confidence. And just whenever possible, try to be open to learning rather than closed and defensive and committed to being right. Build your community around that.
So, Amity, I can't agree more with you. Thank you very much for this closure with these inspiring words. Thank you for being so honest and straightforward and sharing your experience. I hope to see you soon, and let's practice some air yoga one day together.
Sounds great.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bueno, muchas gracias a ambas, realmente. Eso de Air Yoga suena bastante bien, ¿eh? Mariana, y excelente la última pregunta que le hiciste a Amity. Creo que es muy inspiradora también su respuesta. Como ven, el papel de las mujeres también en este mundo tecnológico tuvo su lugar y tenemos por delante conferencias, paneles, mucho más para conversar.
Bye.
Thank you, Amity. Bye, bye. Nosotros nos reencontramos después de esta pausa.